welcome to Where's Wilmington. I'm your host, Lisa Capalla, and as you know, if you've seen this program before, this is where we talk about what's going on in your community, things that you really can be interested in, and you can learn a little bit more about Wilmington and who is really in the town running the show. So today I have with us two guests, and we're actually going to do something a little different than we normally do with the program. We're going to run the full show with these two lovely ladies I have here. We're going to talk about some planning board issues that affect you here in Wilmington. So thank you both for being with us. We have Carol Hamilton and we have Winifred McGowan, and you're both from the planning board, and you are the director and you're an assistant, but you have different capacities. So let's talk about what you really do there.
Sure. The planning office actually houses both planning and conservation.
Okay.
I specialize more in the planning side of things and Winifred in the conservation.
Okay.
In addition to that, we have a community development office that administers community development block grants that's also under the planning purview.
Okay. Do most towns do it that way, or most towns, no?
No, they all set up differently. Some directors of planning actually oversee all of inspectional services. Some just do planning, have separate departments for planning and conservation. So there's probably as many varieties out there as there are departments.
Seems to make sense, though, that you would want to have the conservation folks in with the planning. Obviously, building has to do with conservation. I would think they would go hand in hand. So it might be nice just to tiptoe over to each other and ask questions. That must be a good thing.
It's very helpful.
Tell me what you really do every day, what your job looks like to the folks out there, and how did you get to be where you are?
Mm-hmm. I was actually on the planning board in Wilmington for about 18 years, and moved out of town, but have been a consultant doing planning projects and administering community development block grants. I worked very closely with Lynn Duncan, the previous planning director, and when her position opened, Mike Kyra called, and the town manager called and asked if I would be interested in talking to him about it.
Okay, so that's an appointed position.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you're
That's
not,
right.
No voting, no campaigning, none of that happy jazz.
And my board doesn't either. They're all appointed as well.
Okay, so when we think of planning board, we think of if there's a new mall, you're the guys who allow it, or if there needs to be a zoning change, which we're going to talk about today, that's what the planning board does. Is there more to the planning board than most of us realize?
There might be. We also get involved in kind of pre-planning activities as well. A developer or a company may come into Wilmington looking for a site to make their product, and would come in and talk with us about appropriate sites for their needs. Sometimes we're able to direct them in areas where we know there is land for sale or buildings for rent, but other times they'll come in with a site in mind, wanting to know what the drawbacks from the community's point of view might be to their moving into that site.
I see. So you have to wear many hats. You have to be like a realtor, an
A
assessor, an architect, a diplomat. All of these things I would imagine are in play there. And that sort of dovetails on what you're here to tell us about today. Something big is happening in Wilmington. There usually is, but something particular that you want to talk about. Why don't we tell folks what that is you're here for?
Yes, the planning board is sponsoring a zoning article, which will be called a Neighborhood Activity Overlay District.
Okay.
And it's being proposed for the North Wilmington section of town near the train station.
Okay.
And an overlay district here will mean that people who own land in North Wilmington now, their zoning, whatever their current zoning is, will stay the same.
So you're like grandfathered in.
I'm sorry. Yes, they do.
Like grandfathered in.
That's
if
right.
If it were commercial, you'll stay commercial. If it was residential, you'll stay residential.
Then there'll be an overlay district on top of that, which will allow some different uses than the by right zoning, the underlying zoning.
Okay.
Folks will have the option of taking advantage of either the underlying zoning or the overlay district. And the overlay district will allow some mixed use development. It will allow housing, commercial or retail space, offices, civic uses. And we're hoping that it will be in a fairly concentrated area near actually two transportation nodes, the North Wilmington train station, but also I-93, which is only minutes from North Wilmington as well.
So the first question that comes to my mind, I'm from Tewksbury, I live on the Wilmington line, and I drive 38 on Saturday mornings, never. because of the traffic issue.
That's
So
right.
I would think the first thing that would come to most people's mind, other than if you live in the area, you've just said you're all set. You can either keep it that way, you can use it the new zoning way. So I would understand that if you live in the area, you're pretty much all set.
That's
But
right.
what about the traffic issue, and how are we going to deal with that?
And traffic is an issue. Traffic's an issue everywhere in town.
Right.
As you probably are aware, Wilmington has a number of numbered routes,
Right.
38, 62, 125, 129, and 93. And all of that causes pressure on the town and every single road in the community. The traffic on Route 62 now is heavy, always heavy. It's probably not going to change a substantial amount. It's not going to get better, but it's probably also not going to be substantially worse. The area of North Wilmington that is receiving the overlay district already has a fairly high concentration of industrial users. And industrial users bring trucks into the community, and trucks moving through town at times when people are trying to go to work or pick their kids up from school. So it complicates normal residential traffic.
Okay.
The use of the Neighborhood Activity Center, one of the reasons for having it is that it will encourage a redevelopment of some of those types of zones in the North Wilmington area that you might not want to have there. And industry is certainly one of them. We've already seen one of the industrial parcels in North Wilmington where the Channel building currently is. They went 2 years ago for rezoning to Central Business District because that was the only zone that we had that would allow mixed use.
I see.
Eventually that property will be redeveloped along with
Which
some
you
others.
must have been reading my mind, because my next question would be, why create a new law or a new zoning law if you have something that already exists? But what you're telling me is there is no zoning law that covers what you're proposing.
That's right. There is one in the center of town, the Central Business District zone, which allows for mixed-use development, but
not to the
nothing up in
extent
North
that
Wilmington.
and not to the extent that you're proposing. What's going to be in this community center? What can we expect to see if the bylaw does pass?
What you'd expect to see would be something like a village center. We're not looking for a scale that resembles your favorite city,
Right.
but we are looking for a scale that might resemble the downtown of Lexington or
Okay.
Concord. Lexington's a perfect example. Mass Avenue goes right through downtown Lexington, and 62 will go through the middle of this district. We're proposing buildings that will be constructed closer to the street than what you're used to seeing. But we're also asking developers, as part of the design guidelines, to slope their buildings so that they have more of a New England character, not a lot of flat-roofed buildings. Buildings that are next to residential areas are also asked to keep their height down. We have a requirement of height of 35 feet. Into a development, if we're redeveloping a fairly large parcel, in the interior of that parcel, the height may be able to go up to as much as 45 feet. But anywhere where they're near a residential zone, they'd be asked to step that building back so that it looks
Okay.
in keeping
So
with
it sounds like this is pretty involved. So if we want more information about what this all entails, where do we get that information other than the town meeting? Do we have a website or somewhere? If I'm
We
a
do.
contractor or I'm just a local guy who wants to know what's going on, where do I get this information?
The total bylaw is currently up on the planning department website. So if you go to the town's website and click on community development, planning is under community development, and the bylaw is sitting right there ready to be read.
Okay.
In addition to that, I'm available in the office to answer questions, and my phone number is 658-8238, and I'm there usually between 8:30 and 4:30 in the afternoon.
Excellent. Why do you personally feel we need this in Wilmington? Why do we need it? We have our nice little strip mall with our TJ Maxx and our Market Basket in there. We have everything we seem to need. Why do we need this?
Well, this will encourage a different type of retail development than what you're seeing in strip malls. It will encourage more of the kind of things someone might want to pick up when they get off the train at night and go home.
Okay.
So it will encourage something like a cheese shop or a wine store or a small restaurant. It would encourage some sorts of takeout foods, although we're restricting the use of drive-through windows in this zone.
Okay. It's a good plan since I can see where it would be located. That might be an issue.
An issue, yes. So it actually gives us a variety of retail that we don't currently have.
Okay.
It's also located within walking distance of not just the train, but when housing comes into that neighborhood too, there'll be people living there who'll want to stop for coffee in the morning and sit on a patio in the summertime, who might want to come down in the evening for dinner.
So it sounds like you're looking for something that's going to look more town-like than
correct.
city-like.
Absolutely.
If I can use that analogy there. Tell me what won't be allowed.
What won't be allowed? Some freestanding ATMs
Okay.
won't be allowed there. Funeral parlors will not be allowed there. Drive-throughs, as we talked about.
Okay. Will there be low-income housing as part of this law too?
Yes, there will. There will. We're encouraging affordable housing as part of the mix. We're asking developers who provide residential uses by special permit to give us 10% of the number of units that they're providing as affordable for sale development, and 15% of any rental units.
Okay, because don't you think that's what worries most people when something like this goes in? You know, there are these deals made and you wonder, how does it really benefit the community? So not only are you saying it's going to bring jobs and revenue, but you're also hoping to make the town more advantageous for people to move in.
To live. As a lot of people probably realize, the housing costs in Wilmington have gone up tremendously.
Right.
And there's not a lot of variation in the type of housing or in the price point of housing.
That's true.
So in looking at condominiums or even rentals units in this neighborhood, we're making it so that people don't have to have a car to go to Boston if that's where they work, or even to Lowell. I think we're on the Haverhill line actually. Right. So they could actually commute by a train rather than taking their car out. So that gives them an option that isn't always available in a lot of communities. But it also means that we're targeting more in the $300,000 range and slightly above, slightly below, for people to find housing that's affordable to them. And affordable housing too means folks who are earning in their 50s and 60,000s.
So let's make it clear what the general stigma would be when you hear that word, low-income housing. There's a certain mindset, which I don't want to discuss, but that we all know.
That's correct.
And you're talking about folks who would be considered low-income, but in my mind, $50,000 a year is not low-income.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
What is the general population feeling about this? Are you getting a lot of phone calls about this proposed bylaw change?
Well, a lot of people will see it probably for the first time at the public hearing on March 21st.
And what happens at a public hearing?
The public hearing is actually before the Planning Board and the Finance Committee. We'll discuss the zoning bylaw much as we have here today.
Right.
And folks will be able to ask questions. They'll get some exposure then. We'll probably hold some neighborhood meetings. We have already, as part of the planning process, involved some of the people whose land will be part of this overlay district in coming together and talking about what this was going to be like, and actually even helping us define the outlines of the district itself.
Okay, so the idea is still in process at the point of the first meeting. The town meeting is where it's going to be a done deal.
Too.
And that will be April
22nd.
22nd. And what time?
That's a Saturday, and it's 10 a.m.
That's good though, because that gives people plenty of opportunity.
It does.
Where is this going to be held?
The town meeting is held at the high school in the gymnasium.
Okay.
And the public hearing on March 21st will be in the town hall in the auditorium.
Okay. And to vote, what do you have to do to be able to vote at this meeting?
Oh, pardon me. All you have to be is a resident of the town. You have to be a registered voter, and you're able to come in and check in as a registered voter. You take your seat, listen to the discussion and the arguments, participate if you wish, ask questions if you wish. And then the moderator will call for the vote.
Okay.
You can stand up and be counted.
And the last thing I'm going to ask you before we go to break, and then we'll get back to you, would be how much of a vote are we looking for to pass it? Does it have to be unanimous? How does that work?
Fortunately not unanimous, but it is a 2/3 vote, which is not easy to achieve.
Right.
It has to be 2/3 of the people voting at town meeting.
Excellent. How do you think you're going to do?
We're going to pass it.
Really?
I certainly hope
we'll
so.
hope to get to see that history happen. When we come back, we're going to talk to Winifred McGowan, who has been waiting patiently to discuss with us conservation and wetlands issues. So come right back to Where's Wilmington? I'm Lisa Capalla, and we'll be back in a moment.
Yo, what's up, baby? Wanna learn some history?
Check it out, check it out. Your GED right here, guaranteed, man. Come on, check it out.
Hey, how you doing? Educational videos, top quality, right here.
I got live learning, beautiful books inside.
The National Center for Family Literacy.
Yo, I got your arithmetic right here.
Because you can't get your GED on the street. Call 1-877-FAMLIT1 for free learning programs like GED and family computer classes.
Who needs a high school diploma, huh?
The National Center for Family Literacy. The first step to a better life.
Hi, I'm Timothy Kamal from Pack 58, and you're watching WCTV, Wilmington Community Television.
Hello, welcome back to Where's Wilmington? I'm Lisa Capalla, but then you already know that. You've watched the first half of this program, hopefully, where we've been talking a little bit about planning board issues, and now we're going to switch our focus, although this is part of the planning board. We're going to talk about wetlands and conservation, and my expert for that is Winifred McGowan, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how the wetlands and conservation piece fits into what Carol Hamilton and I were talking about earlier, which is this new activity center. So, welcome, and tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, well, quite a bit of North Wilmington has wetlands around it.
Right.
So some of the plans that come in before the planning board are going to have to also come before the Conservation Commission so that the wetland issues can be addressed at that point.
What happens when we start and we say, okay, we want to create this center or we want to build something? What is the process involving the wetlands? Do we send out a surveyor? Do we look at our old plans? What really happens that gets the ball rolling, so to speak, from your point of view?
Typically, in a larger development, somebody would go out and delineate the wetlands, and then the engineers and surveyors would put those on the plans and work around that.
Okay.
The state law governs a lot. We don't have a local bylaw.
Okay.
We are proposing one for enforcement, but not for otherwise. Mm-hmm. If it's just a homeowner, often we may have information from when they built their house, and we don't always require a homeowner to get a new delineation done.
Now, do wetlands change over time?
They can, and this can be an issue.
1 year it's a wetland, and 20 years later it's not. Can that actually happen?
It can often,
shifting or soil or what have you.
Sometimes it becomes more because when you get a lot of development, you get a lot more runoff, and if it gets backed up somewhere, then that can cause wetlands to enlarge over time.
Okay. What's the point of having wetlands? Why do we need to have them intact?
Well, Wilmington gets all its water from wells, so
okay, that
the wells
pretty much answers that one.
are in the groundwater, so that the wetlands help feed the groundwater.
Right.
The other thing is that wetlands serve a number of functions, and these would be called the interests of the Act,
which would be
the Wetlands Protection Act. But some of them are flood prevention.
Right. I would imagine animals too.
Animals, pollution prevention.
Right.
One of the things that happens when you get polluted runoff from the roads and all is that the vegetation can take out a lot of the contaminants, and then they don't get into the water supply.
Okay. So then when you look at building something, obviously it's really important to know whether you're building on or nearby wetlands, because you don't want to contaminate the groundwater. And you can't build on wetlands, can you?
You're not supposed to. The law does have provisions where you can fill some.
But I mean, physically, I don't think it's really a good idea.
No, the soil is not usually good for building on it.
I would
there
think
are
it wouldn't be
ways
safe.
of engineering it, but
okay.
In the past there was a great deal of building on wetlands,
right.
And now we get people who complain that they have water problems.
Right.
And you look at where they were built and you say, that's
right.
one of the reasons.
Even look at New Orleans, although what they had was not a wetland situation, but a lot of their buildings were built on water. And so that was a lot of the issue with them. Is Wilmington's wetland law situation tougher than other towns? Are we middle of the road? Do we know?
We don't have a local bylaw.
Really?
So we just go under the state's Wetland Protection Act.
Okay. Are we trying to create one with this new bylaw, or is that a separate thing?
Nope, that would be separate. This is an enforcement one that we're proposing.
Okay.
And it's not providing additional wetland areas that are going to be under control. It's not providing additional setbacks or anything like that, which is typically what a local bylaw would do. It would be more stringent than the state in terms of what it's protecting.
So when you say enforcement, you're talking about getting the bad guys. If someone's doing something they're not supposed to be doing, you want to know about it and you want to stop it.
That's
right.
it, yes. And this is more even geared to people who, kind of dig in their heels and say, we're not going to correct it. We're just going to leave it. Because there is a notification process. You're not just socked with a fine as soon as a violation is found.
Okay. So then the obvious question, dovetailing on what Carol and I were talking about earlier, would be, if we build this new thing, is it going to cause problems for our wetlands? And I'm sure you're sure it's not going to, or you wouldn't be proposing it. So how can we be sure that it's not going to?
Well, that's where the review process comes in.
Okay.
And the stormwater has to be managed in accordance with the state and the federal guidelines. And
so you were answering to a higher authority. It's not just the Wilmington Planning Board. You have the state that's looking over your shoulder to make sure what you're doing is correct and acceptable as well.
And then we also have the federal government under the Clean Water Act. We're in phase 2 of making sure that the water gets cleaned up and stays cleaned up. And it's actually a very major commitment for all the towns that are involved in it, because all of the way the local stormwater is handled has to be upgraded if it's not meeting the standards that
How are we doing with that as a community, do you feel?
This is something you should have the DPW come in and
You know what, I
address
surely
that.
will. But how do you feel from what you've seen?
Well,
Is there resistance? Are we okay? How are we doing?
No, I don't think there's a whole lot of resistance as far as the DPW trying to get it going. I mean, there's a lot of inventory work. There's a lot of public outreach that gets done. But it's going to take a lot of money to upgrade the systems that we have, where we only have, say, shallow catch basins, or we're not sweeping every year. Those things would have to be done and put in a deep sump so that you're catching a lot of the sediment. You're also creating areas that you're not getting erosion, where the water comes out from the culverts and so on. And there may be cases where the culverts actually have to be enlarged. And cases where there's been a lot of sediment buildup, where that's got to be cleaned out on a regular basis so that the flow of the streams and rivers is maintained. Otherwise, you start getting things backed up and people's septic systems get affected, and that becomes a public health problem.
Do we have town sewerage in Wilmington?
We have both.
We have both?
Yeah, and a tremendous amount of the town is actually on septic systems. And because the Ipswich River has problems going dry in the summer from some of the drawdowns, there's actually a moratorium on hooking up to additional sewer lines in many areas in the town.
Okay, so from your point of view, in your opinion, this proposal that's going to happen about this community center is not going to affect the wetlands?
It can be designed so it shouldn't. That's correct. Not have a negative impact on them.
That's good. So we'll get some revenue and our wetlands will be okay and everybody should be happy, right? Right. Okay. Now your particular position, is that appointed as well, like Carol's is?
Yes, it is.
Tell me a little bit about what you do on a daily basis and what would we need to utilize your skills for?
Well, a lot of my time is spent on wetland-related issues, especially the permitting.
So if someone wants to build something, do they come see you first to make sure that everything's zoned okay?
They come to any of a number of different departments, and we kind of send people different ways.
Mark, huh?
Yes, and then we have checkoffs as well.
So you're one of the steps along the way for that.
We're one of the steps, and it doesn't really matter what order some of the steps go in for many projects. Although there's times we'll say, you go to planning first, you have to divide your land before we're going to look at it, but we'll certainly give you some idea of what we're going to be looking for before you spend a lot of time in other departments.
Excellent.
And we try to get all the departments to kind of have a handle on that. So a big project, we actually sit down with the developer and their consultants and have all the different departments and say, these are the things that we're looking for under conservation, and planning will say, we want to see these things. And,
right. So again, it's nice to have you all housed in the same area so you can communicate more freely and get the job rolling faster.
And that's a very important part of what we do.
Have there been other projects, I'm sure they have, that have been turned down before this one? Has this been a long time coming and you've been revamping it until it was able to be brought to
Actually,
fruition?
No, this will be the first time on this particular, on both articles, actually, both.
We've tried to have a bylaw for the
local.
town, and last year when it was proposed, the townspeople just kind of said, we really aren't willing to support that. You haven't done enough outreach to convince us, so that we didn't get enough people.
Okay.
You know, there's kind of a shift in staff and just wasn't time to present it. So
Right.
they did say, a lot of us are willing to support some kind of enforcement bylaw.
Excellent.
And so that's where we went.
Well, I think that's a need, and I think it's good to know too, once we build this thing, we're gonna have some enforcement in place, so if something does come up, then we can do something about it. So it's nice to know that's already written. What do you want folks to know today? I know why you came here was to get the word out to the community about what you're doing. If I could just give you both each a minute maybe to say what you'd like from the community, here's your chance.
Well, we'd like, obviously, people to be willing to support us and try to talk to their neighbors, you know, about why they think it's important to support it.
Right.
And then to get out and vote.
Excellent. That was nice and easy. You only needed 10 seconds. And what about you, Carol? What do you really want from the community?
Yeah, a very similar thing. I think that Wilmington has a lot of development pressures on it. It will always. It's in a unique position just above Route 128, just below Route 495. It has excellent access to everywhere in New England.
Right, that's why I love living here.
That's right, and why most people do as well. So what we try to do, and what this bylaw tries to do too, is to be somewhat proactive, get something in place that can be used, but also to try to control the pressure, so that everything that you see isn't being developed, but trying to do it sensitively, trying to take into account wetlands as well as the need of residents and those people who are providing services to us as well.
Well, I also think it's nice that the planning board is directly involved with this, that someone didn't come to you and want to do this. It's kind of nice that the community has seen the need, looked at the growth and obviously the population and many things, and I'm sure you've projected about how Wilmington is going to change. So that's nice that the community actually is forward thinking, as you said.
And this is an activity that is actually proposed by the master plan, which was adopted in 2001 and amended in 2003. This is an implementation activity that the master plan suggests.
So it's not a new idea, it's
Not
just
at
one
all.
that we're finally going to see, hopefully, come to fruition.
Yes.
Okay, let's give your website information one more time and then tell the folks about the 2 meetings you'd like them to attend.
All right. Our website is at the Town of Wilmington website under Community Development. There's a planning prompt, and the bylaw will be there. The 2 meetings that we're hoping for attendance at is March 21st, which is the public hearing, an opportunity to ask a lot of questions and get answers. And the second is to come to town meeting on April 22nd, and we would certainly appreciate everyone's support.
And that's Saturday at the gym.
That's
10
correct.
a.m. for
10
that,
a.m.
for the big meeting.
That's
Okay.
right.
Thank you all for being with us today and for tuning into Where's Wilmington. I'm Lisa Capalla, and get out there and get involved in your community. The only way we can make things better is to get involved. So I thank you for watching, and tune in again for Where's Wilmington another time.